So my name's Mandy, and my son was born with a cleft of the soft palate. This was something we didn't know until he was about 5 years old. Aaron had been struggling with his speech at school, and it was actually one of my best friends who was his teacher at the time who'd said to me, I think it would be a good idea if you take him to the doctors just for a checkup. He was struggling with things like his pronunciation with his words. So, because she was my best friend and I really trusted her, and I knew that she had really good intentions, that I took him along, and the doctor had a look in his mouth. He couldn't really see anything, but he did say, well, we'll refer him to ENT. He is a bit nasally in his speaking. Now, I'm quite nasally in my speaking, and so was my dad. So it wasn't really anything that was making me feel like it was unusual for Aaron. So we waited, I think, about 6 months to see a ENT, but there was an issue to begin with because I had missed an appointment for some reason. So that's why it took the length of time. It wasn't because it was just there was a waiting list. It was kind of down to me. So it was about 6 months when we saw ENT, and I went along just thinking, as I always do with stuff, oh, it'll not be any big deal. It'll just be something small. We'll probably go away, and they'll just say the same as other doctors. There's no really any issue. So when we went to see the doctor at ENT, he had a look in Aaron's mouth, just chatting, did a hearing test, asked if he could have a look in my mouth, which I did at first think that's a bit strange, but okay. And then had another look in Aaron's mouth, and then basically said to me, do you realise that your son has a cleft palate? And so at that moment, it was, one, I wasn't really entirely sure what that entailed, and two, I was kind of taken aback because I did think I was going in there just to come back out with nothing really. So, and I had said, no, I do not. And so he just spoke a wee bit about what it was and asked me if there was any questions. And I had the only thing I could think of was, will they have to have an operation? And the doctor said, yeah, definitely. Over at the Sick Kids, it'll be definitely an operation. So I went away there from there kind of like taken aback. I wasn't expecting it. And I didn't really have a lot of information of what that entailed. So I did the age-old thing, which I don't ever recommend people doing. But my friend at the time had said, have you Googled cleft palate? And actually, I think I was just so much in shock that I hadn't even crossed my mind, but I thought, I will do that. And when I did, I felt like I was reading Aaron. It was spot on. Him, from speech issues, from feeding issues. So it really, really hit me in that moment, like overwhelming. I was really quite upset, and I didn't really know what to do with that. I didn't know anybody else. I didn't really have any information. The appointment wasn't really through for obviously the Sick Kids at that point. So just kind of waiting and just, I suppose, worrying in a bit of a sense. So when Aaron's appointment came quite quickly, actually, because he was 5 by this time. And normally we would have had, had it been diagnosed early, we would have had lots of appointments, consultations and things. So it was, I think it was around about 6 months again for Aaron's operation. So it was kind of like 6 months 5 years squeezed into 6 months, appointments and stuff. So it was really overwhelming, and I suppose at the time I was on kind of autopilot. It hadn't really sunk in. There was a lot. I had to give up my job at that time as well because there was lots of appointments, and so it just felt like I had to just kind of get on with that process, do what I had to do, and it hadn't really sank in. But Aaron did have his operation, which was really successful. He only had to have one operation, which was fantastic. There's always the possibility that they may need another operation. he saw the speech and language therapist, which was amazing, and they were actually really shocked especially when they had read Aaron's notes on paper and then they met him. The speech therapist at the time did tell me that, you know, when I read it on paper, I was really expecting this to be quite difficult, because he'd gotten to an age where it's quite hard to then change habits that you might have learned, especially when it comes to your speech. But in actual fact, Aaron had done amazing and had really adapted to the challenge of his cleft palate, and actually spoke really, really well. And so he only needed a small amount of speech therapy, and really that was down to him just being really, really adaptable, and I suppose down to me as well, and as a mum, as teaching him and adapting to the challenges. And I think that's a big thing that I want to put across, is that parents really adapt to the challenges that come to them, but sometimes that could be to the detriment of things go and get missed, and then actually it's like you've done too good a job. Actually, the impact of that is then the support that you really haven't received, which you needed. So his operation was successful. He needed minimal speech therapy, and from then Aaron has been great. He's been fantastic. And what I realised was that the impact it had was more on me as a parent than it had actually had on him as a child. And so then I started to look back at the things that I had noticed as a parent that maybe nobody kind of listened, or I never felt supported, or when I took it to professionals, no one seemed to pick up on these things. When Aaron was born, I had pretty much a trouble-free pregnancy, and when he was born, I was really, really, really excited to breastfeed. So my best friend, she was 3 months ahead of me in her pregnancy, so it was very exciting. We were bringing our kids up together. We were really kind of hoping to do the breastfeeding and going to different classes. And so as soon as Aaron was born, he latched on straight away, and it was amazing. And I thought, you know, I've got the hang of this. Wow, I thought it was going to be harder than this. And then from then on, it went downhill. So he wouldn't latch on from then on, and I really, really struggled to breastfeed. And I've since learned that actually children who have a cleft, it's very, very practically impossible to breastfeed. But when they are first born, there is such an urge to feed that some parents will find that they will feed for the first time, and then from then on they won't. So the trying to breastfeed and the not being able to was really, really difficult, and it really had an impact on how I felt as a parent, and how I felt as a kind of guilt, failure. And I know that obviously for professionals like midwives and health visitors, you know, breastfeeding is really important, and it was really important to me. And I would always support that mothers, if possible, breastfeed if they can. But with my situation, it felt really that they were really pushing it, but in actual fact, not realising that my son physically couldn't, and all it did was just really added to my guilt, and my feelings of kind of not being a good enough parent, not giving my son the best that he could have. So there was no mention, obviously, when I'd given birth to Aaron, of cleft palate. There was no issues, nothing kind of was brought up. So I have all Aaron's notes from he was born up until now, medical notes, and there is nowhere in the medical notes that even has a tick box with have we checked the mouth for cleft. And I have spoken to different midwives, professionals over the years, and it's always seemed to be a kind of differing opinion of whether they do check that or not. So I had been told previously that, you know, that's something that gets checked as soon as they're born, when they do all their checks anyway, with the paediatrician. But then other professionals saying that doesn't happen. So it was very mixed over the years. So I never ever really got a straight answer, and I always felt that was an issue. It wasn't the same across the board. But had they checked, I would imagine, properly, then they would have seen Aaron's cleft palate. So, but I understand that the mouth's so small, and that because of the tongue and things, it could be really, really difficult to see that. So in a sense, I could have made an exception for that. But then as time went on, I still had issues with Aaron with feeding, and he was a really, really, really upset baby. He would wake every 3 hours. He would want what I thought was fed all the time because he would be upset. What I realise now is just he was really struggling with feeding and breathing. And because I was doing everything that I knew to do as a mum and as a first-time mum, change his nappy, feed him, put him to sleep, you know, rock him and stuff. I was trying all these things and he was still upset. So the only thing I knew to do, or like other people would around me would say, I think he's hungry, he's a hungry baby. So I just kept feeding him, and he would take it. So I thought that must be what it is. And but unbeknown to me at the time, he was upset just because of the circumstances. And obviously I was quite feeling a lot of stress as a parent, and that stress would have transferred onto Aaron as well. And there was other things, like when I would put him down to sleep, he would find it hard to breathe at times, because when I fed him, a lot of the time the milk would come down his nose. And I would bring this up to like the midwives and like the health visitors, and they would say, no, that's fine, that's just reflux. So I had to kind of adapt, because each time I went and I said, like, I don't think he's feeding properly, or like, I don't think like he's really upset and all the time, and it was just kind of always, oh, it's just reflux. So I felt like they were the professionals, they knew better than I did. I was a first-time mum, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I put all my faith and my trust in, and they did. So I still had to adapt. When he was sleeping in his cot, I would prop up his cot underneath, even though that's something that they, you know, would be deemed as you shouldn't do. But for me, my son, he couldn't breathe at night, so what's going to help him if I prop him up a wee bit? Then that's going to help the milk to kind of flow and clear, and he can breathe better. And also with like his teats on his bottle, so we know that for cleft babies they have completely different teats, which I didn't know at the time. So what I started to do was make the hole bigger in the teat myself, because he was going up quite quickly up the teat size, and his suction was really quite big, and I felt like he wasn't getting the milk properly, and that was upsetting him. So I would make the teat bigger, and obviously now I realise the teat wasn't even the right teat for his mouth, and he was struggling. But it was a lot of kind of adapting with the tools that I had, really, and just trying my best to, as a parent. In hindsight, I can look back at that now, but at the time, it really kind of feeds into your feeling of not being good enough, and there's something that you're doing that is wrong, and you know, you've asked the professionals and they didn't see an issue, so it must be me. And then he started getting to the age where he went the first time to the dentist, which would have been before he was 5. So just for as they first start to go a wee routine checkup, just check their teeth. Nothing had came from there, no professionals at this point. So that's what you're looking at, about 4, and in fact 5 including the doctor, because I had him back at the doctor back and forth for issues like if he's had a cold and things like that. And all these professionals had looked in his mouth. A dentist has to look in your mouth. The doctor always looks in your mouth. Health visitors and midwives. So it was 5 sets of professionals that had all looked in his mouth, and nobody had ever mentioned to me that it's a cleft palate. So what I was saying about the first time, I understand how it could have been missed because our mouth's so small, but then Aaron was starting to get older. So, you know, he was like 4-year-old now, his mouth's getting bigger. So I feel like that can't always be the reason why it was missed. There was opportunities there for it to be seen, and actually it wasn't. It was missed a lot of the time. Aaron actually had issues with his speech, as and he didn't speak till he was about 2.5. And me and my friends and like family and stuff, we used to say how he talks gobbledygook, and he would be talking to you like gobbledygook, and it was like he totally knew what he was saying. But we would always kind of laugh about that, not laugh, make fun of him, but we would see it as a kind of sweet, kind of Aaron's doing his gobbledygook, but now realising that, you know, his speech was affected. So he was late at speaking, and I think for Aaron, what happened was within that he became very frustrated. So he wanted to be able to express himself, but actually found it hard to. So that then sometimes turned into anger and frustration, and was one of kind of the issues that I had with him throughout primary school, was his way expressing himself and how that would come out in frustration and anger. Yeah, so when he got to school, then that was when my friend, who was his teacher at the time, had brought that up, and I obviously knowing Aaron really well and spending time with him outside school, she was able to see more than what other people saw, and was able to make that decision based on knowing him really well. Even before that, the teacher had recommended that I take him and to the doctors because he might be on the spectrum, and actually wasn't. I think it was just all caught up in that his frustrations and his way expressing and verbalising stuff was really hard for him. It's taken me a lot of years actually to really come to terms with that. So I would say there was grief involved with that. There was a loss of what I felt like should have been a really special time. I actually still get upset to this day when I speak about it. It was a loss for me. I should have had that special time with Aaron, with my baby, and I felt like I kind of lost some of that. I was caught up in guilt and really frustration and not knowing what's wrong with him, and nobody feeling like I can't help him, and why, and is it my fault and stuff. So, and there's a lot of comparing as well, and lots of mums and dads will know when you have a child with a cleft palate, when you're looking around at their peers and other parents, there's a lot of comparing that you do. So that was tough, but if you don't know what the issue is, it really had an impact. So I really had to come to terms with the loss and the grief, losing that precious time that I wouldn't get back with Aaron. And had somebody just picked it up before then, that it would have been a different story. It would have been a different experience. And also I realised from after Aaron had his operation and he's just grown strength to strength, I realised that me as a parent, instead of before when I was looking at feeling guilty and that I wasn't a good enough parent, I realised actually how great a parent I was, and that so many parents, like I said in the beginning, you adapt. You just adapt because you have no choice. You have to adapt. You're presented with something and you've just got to do the best that you can. And I realised that Aaron's so articulate, and he's caring, and he's all these qualities, and he's got strength, and I realise now where that comes from, and it comes from me, and that experience was really tough, but we were able to turn that into a positive, and that I was able to finally come to terms with the fact that I did the best I could. And then I think before, when I was doing talks for Clapper, I realised it was actually probably a healing process for me. So because of these 6 months they are in like appointments and then his operation and stuff, I'd never actually had time to sit down and just absorb what had happened, accept and grieve for what had happened. So it took me, I would say, a good 2 years after that, and within that was when I was volunteering for Clap and meeting other parents, which was really important to me as well, because I didn't have that kind of community that you'd normally have when your child's diagnosed as a baby, basically. So that I felt like it was really therapeutic, and it helped me to come to terms with what had happened and turn it into a positive. That was really important, and I think that's the thing for parents as well. It's there's different emotions within that, and one of the biggest ones I would say is grief. Do you know, you when you fall pregnant and you've got a baby coming along, you have all these expectations, and then when something happens, you've got to kind of grieve for what your expectations were and accept the way it is, and come to terms with that. And I think sometimes professionals forget that actually it can take a long time to really let that sink in and come to terms with it. It doesn't just happen overnight. And what I haven't spoken about in my story before is that I had already had a child. I had a child when I was 15, and I gave him up for adoption. And so when I had Aaron, it really fed into my guilty feeling like, this is my punishment. Do you know what I mean? This is what happens when, again, because you gave up your first son. And so I wanted it to be perfect that time. I wanted it to be right. And then I was so angry afterwards, feeling like I couldn't even get a good experience with my second son. It must be my fault. Do you know what I mean? So it was kind of caught up. My youngest son is in our lives now, and it's amazing. We have a great relationship. So, but at the time, it was really hard to realise that my first son, well, obviously that experience was painful, and then for my second son, that experience was really painful. So it took me a long time to come to terms with that. I just realised that actually the experiences are what have made me and my children the people that they are today. So, like, I've done a lot of work, do you know, a lot of work, not just with this, through my own job, and what I do, a lot of trauma work and a lot of grief and stuff like that. We're human, and these emotions we can't just bat them away or suppress them. They're there. And it's not until you're in the moment talking about it sometimes that it really hits a wee nerve, and you think, oh goodness, that still has an impact on me. When I started doing my talks with Clapper, it was very important then that I could get this across to professionals, the importance of checking babies' mouths and listening to parents when they come with concerns. Because I was a first-time mum, and I'm quite a people pleaser kind of person, so I would always be kind of like, okay, like what they say goes, and I didn't want to like make anybody's life harder if I question things. But I've learned over the years that you follow your gut and you question everything, and that actually, if you have professionals who are empathetic towards that and can see that the reassurance would certainly, or looking into things a bit further than instead of just dismissing your concerns, is really, really important. Empathy and reassurance and double checking for parents who are in, and it's a overwhelming time becoming a parent anyway. But yeah, to double check, I just always feel like double check, and to I would say as well, to to advocate as well, like to see, make that across the board a check that should be done, instead of different areas having different ways of doing that. I feel like it should just be a check across the board. That's what everybody does. That's so can really trying to be an advocate for us parents and try to push for that as professionals. But yeah, but listening and empathy is a huge thing. And listen, professionals do, whether it's doctors, midwives, all over the range, they do amazing work. Do you know, they do an amazing job, and this isn't about shooting them down, because there is lots of fantastic people who work in their roles who are like lifesavers to people, but there is also, I think, families that kind of get missed and go under the radar because they're not shouting enough, or they're not. I remember, so I had put a complaint into the NHS, and all I wanted them to do was say, we're sorry. And actually, the letters that came back, and I know that for them to admit that they're sorry can have quite an impact, you know what I mean? I wasn't looking for anything else but a sorry. That would admit, I suppose, negligence or something along those lines. But the way that they worded the letter, it was basically that saying that I didn't raise my concerns enough. And what all that did then was put back on me. So it's your fault, Ken. And I was already consumed with guilt. So I thought that was a really insensitive way putting it back on me. And actually, all I wanted was a sorry. Just an understanding that, you know, things could have been better. And so, yeah, we've got to think about the way that we word things and we speak to parents, especially with something so sensitive.